My name is Nicola Hein. I'm a professor at the University of Music in Lübeck, and I teach electronic music and sound art. And I'm talking today about cybernetic listening and embodiment in human-machine improvisation. I will talk about a couple of my own works and sort of use the idea of embodiment and cybernetic listening to essentially describe human-machine interaction and describe what happens in human-machine interaction. I think it relates to a lot of the things that we talked about already today, and yeah, let's see how it goes. So the first piece I want to talk about is called tertiary pretensions. This is a piece of mine that uses a musical agent system that live trains on my guitar playing while I play, and then it becomes a guitar duo. What I will be doing later is a bit of a different version of this piece in the performance part in the evening. The term tertiary pretensions comes from Bernhard Stiegler. He uses this term to describe the conception of future via the digital archive and specifically also money and social media. And my idea about human-machine improvisation is very much that I think it also changes our idea, or it can positively affect our idea of technology, and sort of also going to where I was hinting at earlier already, brings us to different conceptions of ecology. And I sort of see it also as a dialogue with, like, okay, how do we think about interaction with technology, and what does the artistic practice sort of offer us as an experience, but also maybe as a concept. I will play you a little clip. Yes, so I think a lot of questions in human-machine improvisation and in working with musical agent systems also deal with perception and perception of agency. So in some sense, I think, coming back to the question earlier, how do you understand agency? I think part of agency conceptions is, let's say, the artist, but of course also the audience. And if you work with several musicians, having several musicians, how do we perceive agency, and what's the sort of perceptive cues that we get about agency in human-machine interaction? And what I found in working with purely software-based music agent systems is that oftentimes it can be hard to identify and attribute agency. So what you heard before was two guitars. Now my claim is, this is great, maybe you hear two guitars, but it takes a lot of, let's say, expert listenership to hear those two guitars performing together. And that, of course, is due to the attribution and differentiation of musical agency by sonic cues, and of course by the multimodality of our musical perception as a listener. So what I've been sort of interested in exploring is which kind of cues I can use in order to communicate musical agency, and also to see, like, okay, how does, let's say, the psychology that is involved from my side and also from the side of musicians that I work with change in that process. Two pieces that I've done that I'm not going to show anything of is sort of a different variation, imitation game, which was me performing with a Buchla 100 system at Columbia University, performing together with a musical agent that is pre-trained on my guitar playing, that then eventually becomes a dialogue, and having a different kind of sonic language that at the same time I think relates a lot, because it's played by the same person, and I try to get into the sonic space that I play with the guitar using the buchla, but of course that will always sound different than the guitar. Another attempt was using video. In this case, using also video material of myself playing guitar solo and live projecting that into the instrument, or even having video projections of myself performing and then the musical agents side by side, so that you have sort of a life-size comparison of those two musical agents. I mean, so much for the, let's say, purely software-based musical agent systems. And what I've become very interested in this is to work with robotical instruments. So essentially to use musical agent systems that learn musical material of human musicians, but then that musical material gets translated into MIDI and gets realized on robotical musical instruments. This is a piece that I've done a while ago that was a collaboration with the Logos Foundation in Ghent. Probably some of you know the instruments of Gottfried Michael Ras and Gottfried Wilhelm Ras. And so this is a situation where it's Lotte Anker, myself, Sebastian Grams, and Philipp Zubeck performing for human musicians together with 4 robotical musicians. Showing some pictures of the whole setup. So you can see here a double bass, then a tubo, which is a tubular bell robot, a prepared piano, a prepared disc clavier, me on guitar, then the heliophone, Lotte Anker on saxophone, and there's also a percussion robot on the lower left side. And in this piece, we have sort of a system that runs in Max MSP that gets audio signals of all of the performing musicians, so that includes the 4 human but also the 4 robotic musicians, and that then starts controlling the robotic musicians to perform together with the human musicians. And the idea here really is that every performer should have a space to perform as an individual musical voice. So it's not really about anyone following, but really establishing this kind of space where we are able also to deal with, let's say, what's coming back. What does the robot play? Maybe I don't like it, but maybe I need to deal with it, because that's, I think, also how it is performing with human musicians. You have to deal with the choices and with the musical material that you are presented with. And certainly here, to come back to the feedback topic, feedback is a really relevant aspect of that. And really a lot of it is really thinking about, like, okay, how can I direct feedback here in ways that make the whole endeavor aesthetically productive for me. I will play a short clip. Yeah, I find that in working with robotical musical instruments, the very interesting thing is their resistance. And let's say, what can robotical instruments do? What can they not do? And how, in some sense, let's say, translating this whole idea of black MIDI, which I think is very related to how acoustic musicians treat their instruments in exploring instruments, is really like, where do I find those openings in robotical instruments that are also unique to them. So one part is the musical agent system, but then the other part is really like, how do I translate whatever they are playing, which is in the sonic realm or in the audio realm, into MIDI. And that really becomes a whole dialogue also with the robotical instrument, like how is this translated to MIDI? Because there are a lot of possibilities to do, and depending on which kind of robotical system you're using, the outcomes will be vastly different. So it's really also about dialoguing and interchanging with, let's say, what the robot does and what is the personality, what can it do, what can it not do. What I found in this to be really interesting is the psychological aspect. So as we were talking about earlier, what happens if I meet a body in space, and how do I relate to a body in space? Because the interesting thing here is that in some sense, you could say ontologically, the difference in musical agency, if we were thinking only about sound, is, well, it's somehow there, but maybe it's not such a big difference. The real big difference here is on a whole other layer that is also included in how we do music, how we improvise, how we perceive music, and that is really a holistic experience where a physical presence, I think, is absolutely relevant. Merleau-Ponty writes about the body. A novel, poem, picture, or musical work are individuals, that is, beings, in which the expression is distinguishable from the thing expressed, their meaning, accessibility only through direct contact being radiated with no change of their temporal and spatial situation. It is in this sense that our body is comparable to a work of art. And I think it's really this uniqueness of meeting something in space that totally changes the whole way that we interact, even though the ontology of the musical agent system that stands behind it might be the same. And that's, for me, a very interesting sort of experience to make every time again. This is another project that's actually going to be playing for a week at the Saalfelden Jazz Festival now in August. It's an ensemble of robots developed by Chris Janka. We did this project a while ago, this movie that was done at Ö1 in Vienna. Also working with his robot ensemble, and then me coming with my software and performing together with his and his group. And what I found here and also in the other project is always this, let's say, aspect of human psychology that kicks in, where musicians, for example, start to characterize a robot, start to gender a robot, start to sort of anthropomorphize the robot as much as they can in order to form relationships. And that is something that I find is a very interesting sort of experience in doing this, because I see how we are involved into this ourselves with our own psychology and how we are essentially projecting ourselves into the musical agent system. So in that sense, thinking about Lucy Suchman, we can say that the difference in the interaction between software and robotic interactive music systems acts as a powerful disclosing agent about the cultural, biological, spatial, and so forth structure of human social and musical perception, and of course about our philosophical preconceptions of what machines are. Thinking about Robert Rowe, we can say that working with interactive music systems means to engage in a form of empirical music theory and empirical psychology. And this is something that I find very interesting in this process. So in some sense, it's also a psychological experiment every time we do this. It's a philosophical experiment every time we do this, because it's about investigating the conceptions of machine that we're actually laying into the process. This is another project I did, which was me performing solo with actually a larger part of the robot orchestra in Ghent. In this case, it's roughly 25 robots that are controlled by 4 musical agents that live train on my guitar playing and then start orchestrating their playing to the different robots. We'll play a short clip. Okay, and so forth. Andrew Pickering, coming back to the conception of agency, writes about agency that dances of agency are symmetric. They do not center on or privilege the human. We are agents, but so are rocks and stones, cats, bubble chambers. All of these things act and interact. We need to think about forward-looking evolutionary processes, dances of agency, that explore a world of endless emergence and becoming. And of course, now connecting again to all the things that have been said already, I think really the emergent agency between those different musical agents that are put in place are really a very interesting thing here. They are structurally coupled but operationally closed. David Borgo takes this phrase from Francisco Varela. And I still want to, if I can, mention cybernetic listening, because oftentimes I find we talk about agency, but not somewhat the talk about listening doesn't seem to be at the center stage anymore when we talk about it. But I actually find that somehow listening as cybernetic listening, so if we have a cybernetic concept of agency, also to think about cybernetic concepts of listening. So I propose cybernetic listening to be focuses on the happening of feedback, homeostasis, self-production, and the autopoiesis of musical systems. Human-machine improvisation and cybernetic listening are thus based on the co-creative interaction of diverse ecologies of listening. That brings us to the ecology term. Erich Hörl proposes the concept of wild ecologies. So the idea essentially to embrace, now to shorten this a bit, 1,000 ecologies and sort of the exploration of different forms of ecologies of the project of a general ecology. He takes this term general ecology from Bernhard Stiegler. So I want to say that in cybernetic listening, essentially the embedded perceptive modalities of musical agents, also thinking not only about sonic listening, but really listening as a concept that is somewhat thought of more as a systems way of relating to its outer world, where we sort of break free of this idea that listening would be only sonic. But I claim listening is multimodal, and oftentimes in dealing with musical agent systems, actually exploring the perceptive modalities of interactive music systems can be sort of where the aesthetic game and where I think also the interest in interaction can really be explored. I would have had our project from Düsseldorf to talk about. I don't know if we still have the time.
If you can do it in 20 seconds.
Okay. So this is a project Federico and me did together with Simon Rose and Ingo Reulicke. Here the idea was to extend, let's say, the four of us with two virtual agents, one of them reacting to sound and the other one being trained on Simon's saxophone playing, controlled by a motion sensor. Federico was playing with it, but then also Ingo, our dancer, was playing with it. And then all of a sudden you get a mix of a group that in itself already plays on these different modalities of listening, but also with different virtual agents that also themselves have different perceptive modalities. Also, my duo project with Viola Yip, in which we use solar panels as microphones, has been exploring this quite a lot. And yeah, thank you very much.